Hey guys, it's Malthus here once again with a few little starter builds for the new league. This time around it is Harvest League. It's going to be a pretty short video. I'm only going to give you 3 starter builds that I think are going to be pretty solid and not too many X factors thrown in. I am honestly just kind of beat to shit after having to run around all day, buy stuff, put stuff together, make a long ass video, do 12-hour drunk patch notes the night before. I'm kind of dying here. And at the same time, I did 19 builds for the past league, so there's plenty there to choose from, and I can't just keep making builds all day long. And this time around, it is quite a few new things, so it's a bit hard to really say what's going to be good, what's bad, and what you should be playing, but I'll do my best to give you these 3 builds anyway, and maybe you can follow along and enjoy something about the new stuff. But you can always refer to old tried and tested starter builds, something like Cobra Lash and Ice Nova, absolute winners, can't go wrong with those. Double Strike on a Berserker or a Gladiator, or you can check out some other people's builds because they do put a lot of work into their starter builds, whereas mine are kind of just, hey, here's a passive tree, go get him, champ. Anyway, let's get into it. The first thing I want to showcase is a Bleed Gladiator. Using 2-hand weapons, preferably an axe, it will use most likely Earthquake, but I want you to keep an open mind and try out Sunder as well as Earthshatter. I think they might be really fun, different playstyles to the Earthquake one, but Earthquake just seems like an absolute winner for Bleed because it's got big aftershock damage with ailments, and I also want you to incorporate some exerted attacks into this one. This time around I think it's Seismic Cry, the one that gives you extra area, extra damage for the next few attacks. There should be some good Bleed synergy there. Not terribly hard to build these types of Bleed characters, not terribly gear required, and you just go out there, stack a few bleeds. As soon as you get to the end game, you start picking up Crimson Darts so that you stack more bleeds, but early on you'll only really need 1 bleed against enemies for the first maybe 70 or so levels. It's once things start dying a little bit slower, that's when you need to stack more bleeds, and that's when you get Crimson Darts. So keep that in mind, and it should, like I said, be a 2-handed and axe type build because they have the highest bleed scaling at the moment, and the end game of those is to get a Elder 2-handed axe, hopefully a Val axe, with the 60% chance to have 100% more bleed damage with that weapon mod. Now that requires a level 83 Elder weapon, so it might take a bit of work to get, and of course your gloves and amulet would need to be Elder as well, but the rest of the gear is pretty straightforward. And as a Gladiator, I think you have plenty of good movement speed with Challenger charges, as well as nice satisfying bleed pops, but I do feel as though the new Sunder might be extremely fun for this sort of playstyle, and Earthshatter is something to keep an eye on too. So you saw in the clips just then was an Earthquake Berserker I played like maybe a couple years ago, something like that. You can use that one for sort of a reference. But the passive tree is fairly condensed these days. There's nowhere to really travel except for just Marauder and Duelist and this sort of thing, because you're picking up a lot of cool shit. You got the bleed nodes, you got your Crimson Dance, one little cluster that just gets possibly, if you can fit it in anyway, just one little cluster that's going to give you some damage over time, multi, but then you got a lot of Warcry nodes that do sound like they're going to be worth taking. So we're looking at reducing the cooldown recovery of our Warcries, as well as giving them some slightly better duration, making them cast a bit faster, and then just a bunch of axe nodes and life nodes. So there's no real anywhere to travel. You kind of just pick up what you think you need to as early as possible. Probably just go straight for the bleed stuff because you want to start feeling the bleeds as soon as possible, and your first 2 points should most likely be it's actually hard to say. Challenger charges make you feel a lot faster while leveling, so possibly that, but if you really want to start bleeding early on and getting your bleed pops by Cruel, then Gratuitous Violence is going to be the winner. But I think Challenger charges should make things quite quick, even with things like Earthquake as a Duelist Gladiator, and then you get Outmatch and Outlast, which we maintain endurance charges through Enduring Cry spam, and then Frenzies with just the main hand kill, and also you probably do run Blood Rage. Now currently this build does not go out and grab Window of Opportunity because I'm not 100% sold that it will end up being Earthquake. That's why I want you to try out Earthshatter and Sunder as well. Currently this is just Earthquake and it's using old Earthquake numbers, but you can see that some bleed damage does exist there if it works through the old Earthquake numbers. But if you just use something like Sunder instead, right here, you can see that our damage is something like 1 million as well for a single target. So that's not too bad. Very, like, bleed damage is very reliable in what it does. If you have 1 million bleed damage, it usually feels better than like 3 million of some other random variable type of damage because it's pretty reliable, strong, physical DPS. Not much else to say, I don't think, but keep in mind that it might not necessarily be Earthquake in the end, but if it is, you probably want some less duration. You probably want to eventually think about these nodes, because the faster you can slam and get the aftershock and move on, the better. But make sure you are keeping your hit up to date. You probably want to get Resolute Technique by about level 60, because that's when your accuracy starts to dip a little. Pretty straightforward build, should be a lot of fun, and I think you're going to use like Enduring Cry and Seismic, I believe, to get into the Warcry rotation. Yep, that's the one there. The next build is most likely the one I'm going to start with, though I do really want to start all 3 of these builds ASAP. I think Penance brand and Arcanist brand looks like the most different and things to figure out type of builds. So that's what I want to go, because I'll give you this as a bit of a starter, but then I'll try and figure it out as I go along and keep you posted in the coming days in case you pick this build as well. So as far as I can tell, Penance brand looks kind of like a more mobile version of Divine Ire. You chuck on some brands, it takes a bit of time to charge up, it will explode, and it's based off of physical converted to lightning. It's going to be an Inquisitor this time around, and like I said, it just gives me this Divine Ire sort of scaling feeling. So Divine Ire, extremely powerful and a lot of fun. I think Penance brand looks rather pretty, and as well as that, I think it does look pretty fun to play. I don't think brands are going to be in any sort of trouble with the small adjustments, or nerfs as you may call them, coming their ways, because the way I played brands typically was to actually just cast them a lot of times and occasionally do a brand recall. So you're still going to be just playing it kind of like a self-cast build that then has some potential to run around in circles on bosses, at least for a few seconds, which I think is still a powerful playstyle and a powerful way of fighting bosses. So I don't think brands are going to be in any trouble. That said, I will be trying Arcanist brand from time to time, maybe also some physical spells like a Wave of Conviction, a Purifying Flame, a Bladefall, something like that, or actually some other real spells too, like, you know, Frostbolts, Fireballs, Magma Orbs, Shock Novas. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm mostly looking into Penance brand for this character, because I think that just looks like the most fun out of the lot. If we're looking at a Penance brand character, I'm thinking Inquisitor, because I really like the Fizz to Elemental conversion lifestyle of the Inquisitor, and he gives you complete resistance or penetration, ignoration, whatever you want to call, of resistances, which just feels really good in endgame content. He's also got some of the stuff that I absolutely love, which is some reliable ES regen or mana regen if you go the mana route, and as well as that, a bit of extra cast speed, and you're immune to elemental ailments. Now that is just an absolute joy during most new league content, which is pretty typically full of elemental bullshit hitting you. The passive tree is pretty straightforward. In most of the builds I haven't really incorporated much cluster jewel stacking, because don't really know how accessible they're going to be early on, or how hard they are to actually roll. Passive tree is pretty typical of a Inquisitor. You're just picking up some of the good stuff, like over here, getting the brand nodes, some crit multi across the board. We are taking Mind Over Matter and Eldritch Battery, because the idea is to have pretty close to 5,000 life and also 2,000 energy shield, which serves as your mana bar as well as your sort of defensive mana bar. So that's the end goal for Eldritch Battery and Mind Over Matter, with of course a Devouring Diadem, but the current gear is just some really basic whatever the hell, and ideally you're getting a chest with the Gravicious Veiled Craft, which is life as extra mana, as extra energy shield, which might take a bit to unveil, but until then, something like a Carcass Jack is just fine. You just won't have as much energy shield as a defensive measure. Theory Promise is the only real unique you probably want to shove in the build, or maybe a Taste of Hate as well. Depends on how accessible some things are. Currently, the build is showing you what Divine Eye scaling looks like, though it is the entire brand setup. We do have Stormbrand here as well, but it's pretty similar to Divine Eye through scaling, I think. So that's why I've got it all attached here. And instead of faster casting, this is probably going to be Swift Brand, though maybe you don't want to use it for endgame, maybe not for bosses. We'll have to wait and see, but Swift Brand seems like it might be very good for actual clearing, since it just speeds up the entire Penance Brand explosion type thing. I don't know why I've got an added lightning here, but there it is. It's probably supposed to be something else. Anyway, I've got a Hatred, a Herald of Ice, and a Purity of Ash. Purity or an Ash, not too sure. That's 100% of our reservation with all of those combined. Though if you do get a Devouring Diadem, you can instead run a Hatred, a Wrath, and something like a Herald of Ice or an Ash or a Purity. We'll have to figure it out as we go. Aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. We are grabbing a bunch of the other brand nodes. And it's just, I'm probably going to level with Winter Brand, whatever it's called, because it's the new skill, it's level 12, and we don't get Penance Brand till 28. So we're going to start by going through here and picking up all these Ellie nodes, and that should give us enough viability to level as Wintertide Brand and actually experience that playstyle until we swap over to an actual Chad brand like the Penance or Arcanist brands. And then lastly, it's going to be an Impale Berserker. Typically, I think you can make this one very easily as Cyclone, but we do want to keep an open mind and use things like Sunder or Earthshatter as well. Because I think they can very well work here, and it's going to be, instead of the bleed scaling like the Gladiator, more of a Impale stack, and it should still be pretty good in that regard. It might be a bit of a faster playstyle, it might hit quite a lot harder, and we want to use the new Warcry Intimidating Cry, which gives you a bunch of double damage extra slam attacks. So it has potential, I think, to be quite big, but if it doesn't feel good with those skills, we can easily just substitute in Cyclone and have a good few million DPS with a really fast playstyle and nothing terribly expensive into the build on this one, as it is pretty basic, I think. So that one looks a little something like this. Once again, the trees are very condensed in the Marauder and Duelist areas. There's no need to go anywhere else, especially if we're doing axes. And we are rolling with a whole bunch of the crit nodes, and as well as that, a whole bunch of the Warcry nodes. We are also stacking some Impale action, so we are trying out the Impaler, which with some big slow sort of attacks, maybe with some Earthshatter, I think could potentially be rather effective. And then a lot of our single target will come from Intimidating Cry, which lets us slam some extra big double damage attacks. The idea is to go with a Flesh Ripper, quite a lot of crit, pretty basic damage. All you're looking for is just a bit of physical and then some crit rolls. And Abyssus takes care of most of the crit multi in the build, and the only other real unique you probably need is a Lion's Roar. Everything else is just focusing on big life, bit of accuracy, stuff like that, because all of the damage should come from Abyssus and the Berserking nodes. Maintaining these stacks of rage is going to be really good for our attack speed and damage, and apparently Warbringer just got a bit of a buff where it gets 10 rage per 5 power, so it's pretty damn easy to maintain mega amounts of rage, and you're only sacrificing 10 rage every time you cry. So it might just have a chance to give us quite a much thicker playstyle, quite a lot more rage sustain and bigger damage from the war cries. But if it feels shit, just spec into Flawless Savagery and that should be fine too. First 2 points are most likely Aspect of Carnage though, but definitely look into this one, play around with it if it feels right. Otherwise, yeah, pretty straightforward passive tree, just trying to get yourself as much life and Warcry stuff as possible. Jill's most likely just going to stack some crit multi. We do grab these little fortify nodes as I want to try and keep up fortify as much as possible on this type of character, but we're probably rotating Enduring and Intimidating Cry for our 2 Warcries, and Enduring Cry, at this point is going to be pretty damn thick the way it's working. And of course, you do have your Berserk as an oh shit button to just take a whole bunch less damage. But currently we're looking at several million damage on just a shitty Sunder that's pre-buff to any of the 2-hand stuff, and without incorporating any Warcry stuff, I think it could well do quite some serious damage, but that is something to be seen. So I don't really want to go too deep on the starter builds because I think it's kind of provisional. We're not too sure what's going to work out of the Warcries, how clumsy they're going to feel with cooldowns and the cast times. So if you really just want to, get a nice solid start out there, probably do something like a Cobra Lash, an Ice Nova, your VD Spell Slingers, all that sort of stuff. But we're going to go slightly into the deep end and try some of these. I didn't want to give you a elemental slam build like a Tectonic or an Ice Crash because I think they do suffer a little more in the end game without good gear, whereas the pure physical ones should hold up for end game even with shitty gear. But Tectonic, Consecrated, Ice Crash, all of those do look like they're going to be quite a lot of fun with a Chieftain or a Slayer or something like that as well. So if you want to be a bit risky, feel free to try those out as well. I think the big 2-hand playstyle should be quite a lot of fun this league, especially trying to craft some fun new items from Harvest. I am gonna put up this video, go to sleep, and then start the stream about an hour before the Harvest League starts. So that's in just a few hours for me. We'll have some scuffed as fuck cosplay as always. It has been quite a challenge trying to put this thing together. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I'm still fine-tuning some of the last touches. But thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoy this video and the start to your Harvest League. I'll see you guys in the stream if you feel like stopping by. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.